This Child's Little Messenger bag is so quick and so easy to make. There's no frills, there's no fuss, there's no pockets on here. The only technique that you have really is squaring the bottom of the bag and fitting in a magnetic snap. But it's going to be really useful for carrying toys or lunching, and of course you can make it a little bit bigger. You could make the strap longer on that if you wanted to as well. But as I said, it's really easy to make. Here's how you do it. I've got 2 pieces of outer fabric, 2 pieces of lining fabric, and 2 pieces of fabric for the flap, and then 1 for the strap and my magnetic snap. On the wrong side of the outer pieces I've fused H640, so that's a fusible fleece, and it just gives the fabric a little bit of firmness, but it's still soft enough to make it very simple to sew. And I've done that on one side of the flap pieces as well. So that's how my bag's going to look basically, with the flap in the contrast colour. So let's make up the flap first of all. I'm going to round off the corners slightly. So anything that you have that can make a rounder shape. So I happen to have a little embroidery hoop. You could do this freehand if you're confident enough, and just draw around there. And I'm cutting through both the lining and the outer fabric at the same time. Then we'll put the clasp onto the lining side of the fabric. So I'm going to fold this in half and just crease the centre point here. And I'm going to fit the clasp centrally about 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres from the bottom. So what I am going to do is to just take a little piece of spare fabric and pop that behind here to help to hold it in place and help to strengthen the area where the snap is, because it will be under a little bit of stress. So let's pop that on here. So that's the back of the clasp, and I'm just going to draw a line through each of those, each of the holes on each side of that. And then you can either take a quick unpick or a sharp pair of scissors and snip through both layers. Then we're going to take the thinner side and push the prongs through the holes, take the back, pop that on and squish the legs. Then this is going to be sewn right sides together with the opposite side of the flap. And I'm just using 1/4 inch or a 6mm seam allowance. So nice and slow around the curve. This is why we wanted the clasps to be a little bit further away from the hem, so that we're not manoeuvring the sewing machine foot around it. And just keep sewing. And then I'm just going to snip into the curves. So pinking shears would be ideal if you have them, but just to help the seam to sit flat. So I turn this inside out, or the right side out now. And let's give that a quick press. I'm just using the end of my point turn of the curved end to just push that curve out there. And press. Let's come back in again. There we go. and then I shall top stitch all the way around the edge. Then we're going to take the front and back pieces and sew the flap centrally, so the same distance from each side here, with the fastener facing upwards. So you can measure and mark that if you wish, but you can see that sitting right in the centre. And I'm just going to sew close to the edge, so within the seam allowance. Then we'll sew the front and the back of the bag right sides together. Let's move that flap out of the way. And we're going to sew all the way around the bottom here. To make the base square, I'm going to squish the corners so that the base seam sits on top of the side seam, and I'm pushing the seams in opposite directions, so one that way and one that way. You can pop a pin in there if you wish. Then I'm going to measure just ½ an inch from the point of the fabric, so not from the end, the actual point of the fabric, and sew straight across. And then chop that end off. And the same with this side. So this time make sure the base seam is facing in the same way. Measure your ½ an inch straight across. And sew just like we did before. Chop it off. Then we're going to turn this the right side out and fit the second half of the magnetic snap. And I'm doing it at this point because now I know exactly where it needs to fit. So now we take the larger part of the magnetic snap and its backing. We're going to fold over the flap. Now we don't need this too tight because we are going to put a strap at the side there, so the bag will have a bit of depth. So just fold it over so it's quite loose. And then we can mark exactly where that needs to go. So I'm just going to use a Sharpie, not a red one, so that you can see where it is. Normally I'd use something with erasable ink. That goes there. And you can measure that to make sure it sits exactly in the centre. Quite confident in that. And then again, like before, I'm going to put the snap over the top, and I'm just going to draw the lines on there. And this time, you can use your scissors, like I said before. You can use a quick unpick if you have one, so 2 ways of doing that, and just make a small incision over those lines. I know I say it a lot, but you can make a small hole bigger. If you make the hole too big, then you've just got a hole in your fabric. So just pop the back on there, squish the little legs open, and that's how my bag's going to be. But we need to make up the lining and the handle, so let's do the lining first. So just like before, I'm going to sew around all 3 sides. Just line that up. I'm going to leave a turning gap in the side of about 4 inches or about 10 centimetres so I can turn it inside out. And I'm going to cut out the corners just like I did on the outside of the bag. Then let's make up the strap. So I'll need my iron again. I'm going to spray this with a little bit of Best Press. You don't have to do this, it just makes the fabric a little bit, it makes it crease better. I'm going to fold it in half and iron it. Then fold this side to the centre and iron, then fold this side to the centre and iron. And then fold this in half and iron it again. Just pop those out of the way. Then I'm going to sew down both sides. This is going to go facing downwards over the seam on each side of the bag. Just going to trim that and make that neater. So right over the seam at the side. Make sure the strap's not twisted. And come up to the seam on the opposite side and sew straight across here. Then we'll take the lining, drop the outer bag and the handle and the flap all inside. Make sure the handle of the strap is facing downwards. And I'm going to match the seam. I'm just going to pop a clip in there to hold it in place. I'm not worried about seams being pressed open or to one side or anything. It's just however they decide to go with this bag. A clip in there. And then I'm going to sew all around the top. So free arm on your sewing machine may help. Slip that over there and sew. Then we'll turn the whole thing through that turning gap. And with a little hole at the side, I'm just going to pull the two sides of that apart and sew straight over the top. Then I'll push the lining inside the bag. Just trim my loose threads away, and again I'm going to just iron this. With the seam right on the edge, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around the top. needed that off again. So making sure the straps are out of the way and your flaps facing upwards. And so take it a little bit slowly as you go over the straps, because you've got a lot of layers of fabric there to sew through. And again, I'll just trim my loose thread off here. And that is my little bag finished. So as I said at the start, it's very quick, it's a very simple bag to make. I think if you're making this for a child and you do have any of the fabric in their favourite characters, they're absolutely going to love it. And you can increase the sizes if you wanted to make it bigger as well. So I hope you enjoyed that again, and I shall see you again with more very soon. Bye bye.